I'm Iranian. I'm an Iranian. I'm Iranian in UK.
Omid Jalili, a very British comedian.
Oh, put a sock in it, Quentin.
Starts tomorrow at 9:30 on BBC One.
It's a One Extra Breakfast show with me, Trevor Nelson and Zena. These are the records that get us going in the morning.
We want to know what your breakfast is.
I know what tune you want.
I want to see you do it, all right?
Yeah, Mr. Sam.
I want it on your hip. I never ever stop.
And that's it from me, DJ Cameo, One Extra. Till next week, it's all blessed.
The news now on BBC One Wales with Fiona Bruce and Thomas David.
Police find another body at a house in Margate and say they believe it is that of Dinah McNichol. The body of the 18-year-old was discovered buried in the back garden. She went missing 16 years ago. It's resolution of a kind for her father.
Well, I've been grieving for 16 years within myself,
Police continue to search the house and garden. They say there is still a lot more work to be done. Also tonight, the woman who claims she saw Madeleine McCann being abducted breaks her silence.
I'm being called a liar and fantasist and all this, and I know what I saw, and I think it's important that people know what I saw because, I believe Madeleine was abducted.
After the first run on a British bank in 140 years, the head of Northern Rock has resigned. And was it cold comfort for Steve McLaren in Austria tonight?
In Wales, he lit up our lives. Tributes are paid to the student murdered on a night out in Liverpool. And an American fighter plane which crashed off the Welsh coast. 65 years on, the sea gives up its secret.
Good evening. The intensive search of a house in Margate in Kent has yielded a second body. Police said tonight they believe it is Dinah McNichol, who'd been missing since 1991. She disappeared on her way home from a music festival when she was 18. Earlier this week, the remains of the schoolgirl Vicky Hamilton were found in the garden of the home. Peter Tobin, who once lived there, has been charged with her murder. Our crime reporter Ben Ando is in Margate. Ben.
Fiona, all week long they've been searching. Now they've found two bodies that may have lain here undisturbed for 16 years until now. And the question being asked here and elsewhere, perhaps louder than ever now, is could there be any more? They'd already found one body at this home in Margate. Today another has been unearthed.
There's been a significant development here. Another human body has been found. It's been removed to the mortuary this afternoon where we'll be conducting a post-mortem this evening.
This morning the police had resumed their work, cutting through concrete to reveal the grim secrets in the soil dating back 16 years. A short time ago the police confirmed they'd found who they were looking for.
As a result of the height, clothing and jewellery found with the body, the evidence is consistent with the body being that of Dinah McNichol. Dinah's father, Ian, has been informed, although formal identification has yet to take place. As you'd expect, forensic samples have been taken from the body and have been submitted for urgent analysis at the laboratory, and we await the outcome of that analysis.
Dinah McNichol vanished after going to a music festival in 1991. Earlier, her father told the BBC today's events at least ended their uncertainty.
So that we can have closure and then we can go through grief, because I've been grieving for 16 years. She was absolutely beautiful and she had everything to go for.
The searching at 50 Irvine Drive, Margate, began last week. First to be found, 6 foot below the surface, under sand and a layer of chalk, was Vicky Hamilton. Today, nearer the house and just next to the patio, they found Dinah McNichol. Vicky Hamilton, then aged 15, from Bathgate in West Lothian, had also vanished in 1991. Yesterday, 61-year-old Peter Tobin, an odd job man, appeared in Linlithgow Sheriff Court, charged with murdering her. Because of Scottish legal restrictions, the BBC has to hide his face. In Margate, the police have found one body they expected to and one they did not. Tomorrow, the search will resume in case there are more grim secrets here. And though Essex police say they have found who they were looking for, they will return here tomorrow. It's clear there is more work to be done here and there is more digging to be done. Fiona.
Ben, thanks very much. In the light of the discoveries in Margate, police are now re-examining a number of other cases over 4 decades where women have gone missing and are believed to have been murdered. Here's Gavin Hewitt.
2 bodies of missing women found in one location. The big question is whether these bodies provide links and clues as to what happened to some of Britain's other missing girls and young women. Dinah McNichol, whose body was found today, disappeared 16 years ago. Her case had attracted national attention with a reconstruction featured on the BBC's Crime Watch programme.
Dinah McNichol, if you're watching, will you call your father, your grandma or Sarah? All of them are waiting by the phone right now.
Dinah was last seen at a music festival and she disappeared while hitchhiking home. 4 days ago, the remains of Vicky Hamilton were found. She had disappeared 16 years ago from her home in Bathgate, West Lothian. As a result of this, the Association of Chief Police Officers has launched Operation Anagram. Detectives across England, Scotland and Wales have been asked to check their unsolved cases, particularly those of young women that had gone missing or been murdered. Detectives are expected to meet in the next few weeks to coordinate what will be a massive operation. There are 2 cases which will immediately attract attention. Firstly, that of Louise Kay. She was 18 when she disappeared from Eastbourne in June 1988. She had gone to a nightclub and was last seen dropping off friends. Her family are still hoping for answers.
If Louise does happen to be a victim, at least we know and we can actually grieve for her and bury her.
Then there's art student Jessie Earle. She was 22 when she also disappeared in Eastbourne in 1980. Her remains were found 9 years later at Beachy Head. Yesterday, her father was visiting her grave.
After 27 years, too, of false trails, you don't sort of get your hopes up too high. You know, one always hopes that you're going to find out this time, but we don't know.
Cases going back almost 4 decades will now be dusted down and reviewed in the light of what is being found in Margate. And perhaps for some families, there will at long last be answers. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News.
A close friend of Kate and Gerry McCann has spoken publicly for the first time about the night when their daughter disappeared. In an exclusive interview with the BBC, Jane Tanner says she's adamant Madeleine was abducted because she saw a man carrying her away. Here's Richard Bilton.
The Portuguese police say in the hunt for Madeleine McCann, the so-called Tappers 9 could be everything. The McCanns and 7 friends were staying at this complex on the night Madeleine disappeared. What the group saw that night could hold the key to the case. Jane Tanner, here at the back of a group with the McCanns in Luge, is the first of the friends to speak to the media. She says she did it to set the record straight.
I know that you've not spoken to the media before, and yet you've been, much discussed. Why have you chosen to speak
because
now?
I've not spoken because the Portuguese police told us not to talk about the case at all. And, from day one we've done everything we can to help them with the investigation. I think maybe I'm talking now because I'm being called a liar and fantasist and all this, and I know what I saw, and I think it's important that people know what I saw because, I believe Madeleine was abducted, and if people are not taking that seriously, there could be people out there that see her somewhere, could have evidence, to give, and they think, oh, well, I'm not going to give that because, she wasn't abducted. And that is the scariest thing, scariest thing out of all of this, that people wouldn't come forward because they think we're lying, and it's just rubbish.
This is what Jane Tanner says she saw. At 9:15 on the night Madeleine disappeared, a man walking away from the complex carrying a child. She believes this is Madeleine McCann being abducted. Police sources say they're likely to talk to the friends again to go over the details of that night. Jane Tanner says she will do whatever is required.
Have you ever refused to answer any questions?
Never.
Have you been ever asked to return to be questioned?
No.
Would you be prepared to?
Yes, yeah, of course we would. Yeah, I mean, you know, if it helps to find Madeleine, we'll interview tomorrow. You know, we're obviously key witnesses.
Madeleine's parents remain named suspects. There is a new detective in charge of the case and everything's being reassessed. But the investigation continues to focus on two theories: that there was an abduction or that Madeleine died as a result of an accident in flat 5A. Richard Bilton, BBC News.
And you can see more of that interview with Jane Tanner in a special panorama, The Mystery of Madeleine McCann, at 9 o'clock on BBC One on Monday. After the queues and the first run on a British bank in 140 years, the head of the troubled bank Northern Rock has resigned. The chief executive, Adam Applegarth, and several directors have stood down. I'm joined by our business editor, Robert Peston. So, Robert, was this inevitable?
Well, it is in a way, Fiona, a bit of a sort of dog bites man story, in the sense that when a bank makes the kind of strategic error that this bank made, and it has to go cap in hand to the Bank of England for taxpayer-backed loans, which now total some £24 billion. That's an incredible humiliation for the organisation. Heads have to roll. And when the new chairman, Brian Sanderson, took over a few weeks ago, he made it clear that he wanted a new board. Funnily enough, I think that the big argument, or the big bit of negotiation that went on, was not for Adam Applegarth to go. It was to persuade him not to go immediately, but to stay on for a couple of months to see this bank through to the next phase in its life.
So what is the next phase? What's the future hold for Northern Rock now?
Still pretty uncertain. Today was the deadline for bids, and there were something like 10 preliminary bids. Very few of those are serious. There are two that I think are pretty credible. One's from a private equity firm called JC Flowers. The other's from the great showman of, there he is, the great showman of British business, Richard Branson. And his bid on behalf of Virgin Money is described by people involved in this process very credible. He's thinking about putting something like £1 billion of cash into this business. However, nothing will be decided on the fate of Northern Rock until the Chancellor makes a very big and important decision, which he's being urged to do sooner rather than later, which is how long is he going to be prepared to provide this extraordinary amount of taxpayer-backed money.
OK, Robert, thank you very much. In Bangladesh, hundreds of people have died and thousands have been left homeless after a powerful cyclone. The country's coastal strip has been hardest hit and some villages have been completely flattened. This report from John Brain.
Generating winds up to 150 miles an hour, Cyclone Sidr tore through Bangladesh's southwestern coast, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Hundreds died when their flimsily built homes were flattened by uprooted trees. Others were overcome by a tidal surge, which left many low-lying areas underwater. It could have been worse. Early warning of the storm meant more than 500,000 villagers were able to flee their homes and make for emergency shelters. But no one knows how many are still missing. Some areas are still inaccessible, and with power lines down, getting reliable information is proving difficult. The relief operation is struggling to supply food and drinking water to all the survivors. Not for the first time, the international community is having to rally to Bangladesh's aid, offering emergency support. A response to yet one more natural disaster in a country that's had more than its fair share. John Brain, BBC News.
The most definitive warning yet of the dangers of global warming that could shape environmental policies for decades will be issued tomorrow in a report for the United Nations. Our environment correspondent David Shipman has seen the report and is in Valencia in Spain, where the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is meeting. David.
Fiona, there's a really striking phrase in this report that human activities could cause abrupt or irreversible climate change. It contains a pretty grim picture of dangers ahead, but the report does also offer a roadmap for future action to help us avoid those dangers.
High winds in the mountains of Spain and a medieval fortress flanked by a very modern source of power. This is one of the largest new wind farms here, and it's not only transforming this ancient landscape, it's also part of a revolution in energy, which the United Nations Climate Panel warns is essential.
Every time one of these things turns, every time a shadow passes over me, that's energy generated without greenhouse gases. And what the scientists are now saying
is that we need a massive investment in this kind of technology to head off the worst effects of global warming. And they estimate we've got about 10 or 12 years in which to do it.
Initiate the dialogue.
So a stark conclusion from this panel of the world's top climate scientists, and officials from more than 100 governments are endorsing it. That really matters. But one image overshadows this gathering, the rise in greenhouse gases. Just as we're told, the need for action has never been clearer.
On the one hand, the frightening prospect that if we don't act on this issue, climate change could run out of control and we would see irreversible consequences. But fortunately, also the fact that we have many of the technological solutions available now to really avoid those catastrophic consequences.
And do you think governments will listen?
I hope so.
Already this year, the climate panel has warned that polar bears and other species will be at risk, amid predictions of warming of nearly 2 degrees to up to 4 degrees Celsius during this century. Africa, they've concluded, will be among the hardest hit, with yields of crops possibly falling by up to 50% as droughts become more severe. And the solution? Well, they say new sources of energy, like this solar power station, is one, as part of a major drive to cut greenhouse gases by 2020, while they just keep heading up. And all the time, the warnings continue. Storm surges like this one battering eastern England last week are predicted to get bigger. That's why defences along the coast are being built up. In Kent, they're adding to this barrier as the sea level rises. Here in Spain, there's a different worry. Not enough water. Valencia's main reservoir is only a fifth full, and the forecast from the scientists is for even drier conditions. Climate change is suddenly alarming. The question is how the world will respond.
The timing of this is crucial. Next month we should see negotiations on the start of a global treaty to cut greenhouse gases, but we don't know if the two biggest polluters, China and America, will take part. The hope here is that this report may help persuade them to. Fiona.
David, thank you. Coming up on tonight's programme, DIY DNA testing, how you could now unlock your genetic code on the web and see into your future.
I'm convinced that this is going to serve our society well.
This is the marketing of fear. It's about testing your genes, telling you you're at risk.
General Pervez Musharraf has told the BBC tonight that his actions were unconstitutional and illegal when he declared a state of emergency in Pakistan. But the General said he acted because judges and politicians were trying to derail the country. Tonight, the US Deputy Secretary of State, John Negroponte, has flown into Islamabad, saying he wants to put the political process back on track. Damien Grammaticus is there.
There is one reason John Negroponte is in Islamabad tonight, because the United States fears the political situation is slipping out of control. So he's here to rescue a deal that Britain and America have worked for a year to achieve, getting General Musharraf and Benazir Bhutto to agree to share power. In Pakistan today, more anger at General Musharraf's state of emergency. Ever since November the 3rd, when the general suspended the constitution and sacked most of his Supreme Court, he's faced mounting criticism at home and abroad. Tonight, General Musharraf spoke to the BBC. He said he'd been unfairly maligned in the West ever since he first sought to remove his Chief Justice in March.
Before March, I was very good. Suddenly, did I go mad after March, or suddenly my personality changed? Am I Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or what is it? Am I such a person? Please go into the details, the causes. What am I doing? Have I done anything unconstitutional, illegal? Yes, I did it on 3rd November. Did I do it before? Not one.
But he said he'd been forced to curb an out-of-control judiciary, and he criticised Benazir Bhutto for threatening to boycott elections.
It is she, actually, who may not be wanting elections in Pakistan. And it is she who may want to go on to the agitational mode, because she would not like to go into election, because her party is not in a state to win at all.
Ms. Bhutto was released from house arrest today. She now says sharing power with the general looks impossible.
I can't see how I can team up with somebody who raises hopes and dashes them, who makes commitments and moves the goalpost. He talked with me about a roadmap for democracy and imposed martial law. He says one thing and he does the opposite. So I don't see how I can get back to talking with General Musharraf.
It's clear then just how bitter the tone is now between the General and Miss Bhutto. So some big questions. Can they hope to be partners after this? And if not, do Britain and America have a plan B? Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Islamabad.
A new internet service has been launched which enables you to study your own DNA. Subscribers will be able to assess their risk of getting heart disease, cancers and other common illnesses. But critics have condemned the concept, saying people may misinterpret or misuse the data. Palab Ghosh has the story.
It costs hundreds of millions of pounds to decode the human genome. Now this company is offering to decipher yours for just under 500.
What we are selling here, what we are launching here, is a service where people on their own free will, they even have to pass a rather high economic threshold, they are coming to ask to try to learn more about themselves. And I think that is laudable, and I'm convinced that this is going to serve our society well.
If I wanted to find out about my genetic future, I'd post a swab of my DNA off to the company. They'd then make a genetic analysis which would be available online. If I logged in, I could find out whether I was more at risk of disorders such as heart disease, hypertension and some cancers. I could even trace my ancestry. Subscribers would log in to see their personal profile, but some doctors fear that people could misinterpret the information.
People will be very concerned, probably, with these results, and they will want to have medical help in terms of understanding the risks and what can be done possibly to reduce them. And it may well be that these risks are not significant and not worth knowing about.
But despite reassurances, there's concern that subscribers could end up taking medicines needlessly.
This is the marketing of fear. You could be falsely worried or you could be falsely reassured. Basically, it's about marketing and not about your health.
The company providing the service say that people have every right to know about their own genome and that it'll lead to a greater insight into who we truly are. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
An offensive has been launched today against gangs and guns. The Metropolitan Police say they're going to call in leaders of several prominent gangs for face-to-face meetings to try to stop the cycle of violence. It follows the latest shooting of a 17-year-old in London. And there are now concerns that gun culture may be spreading from our big cities to other areas, as our home editor Mark Easton has been finding out in Preston in Lancashire.
Preston's Fyshwick estate is controlled by a gang called FYD, Fyshwick Young Defenders. The warning salute of a masked man gave us notice that we had entered their territory.
About 5 years ago, two members of a notorious Manchester gang, the Longsight crew, came to live in Preston and, according to police, started strutting the streets wearing bulletproof vests. Well, today, gang culture and the fear and violence it brings are part of daily life on some of the city's estates.
There are three quite clearly defined groups who are all in dispute with each other over whatever you call it, territory. The common denominator with all three groups is they're all involved in dealing Class A drugs.
So it's a three-way fight for territory?
It's a three-way fight for territory, and unfortunately the level of the violence that's being used is escalating a little, and that's why...
Guns, knives, baseball bats, I'm told?
Yes, so all those things.
Daniel Grant, pictured here with his younger brother, faces a long jail sentence next week for carrying a gun. His mother says she knew nothing of his weapons until the police turned up.
He had a taser gun, he had a gun, and something else. Yes, gas he had as well, all to protect himself.
But it's frightening for other people, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah.
Running around with guns.
Because I do believe they'd probably use them if they had to defend themselves.
Preston's gang culture is evident on the internet. Young local men parade their fascination with weapons, particularly guns. Daniel Grant's brother Dale among them.
Yeah, carry a knife, carry clashes, CS gas guns, all that kind of stuff that'll scare people off. If you show them that, then they know that you're not like in our language, you're not a muppet.
All we've got to say is that lay the guns down, the weapons, the drugs, stop all of it.
But Dale claims to have turned his back on the gangs and the promises of money and excitement. Under the guidance of youth worker Omar Khan, he's preaching a different message.
Last 5 years I've seen a massive increase in the use of guns, especially knives and guns, and weapons really on young people on young people. And I wasn't going to be prepared to stand there and just watch it happen.
If you see trouble, then stay out the way.
On one of Preston's most troubled estates, another Omar initiative to confront the gangs on their own turf.
I've lost my family. My mum died when I was in jail. I can never get them things back.
Former gang members on temporary release from a nearby jail have been recruited to de-glamorise gang culture.
I'm going to go out there after 16 years in prison, and it's a totally different world to what I know.
Overall in Britain, the risk from gun crime is falling, but in places where gang culture's taken hold, it's a different story. Preston hopes it can reverse the trend before it's too late. Mark Easton, BBC News, Preston.
England's footballers have been in action tonight against Austria. Highlights over on BBC 3 after the news, so you might want to look away for the next couple of minutes. It's the start of a big weekend, with Scotland able to qualify for Euro 2008 if they beat Italy. And although England played tonight, they're also focused on an important match tomorrow, as Adam Parsons explains.
So here's a fresh image of England's footballing fortunes. Michael Owen hobbling off during tonight's friendly victory over Austria. The chances of these players qualifying for next year's European Championship already hang by a thread. If Russia and Croatia both win tomorrow, England are all but out. But the boss continues to believe results will go his way, and that his team's future will be settled next week when England play Croatia at Wembley, a game that Owen will miss and which could decide McLaren's future.
I still believe that. I believe that all the way through, that the Croatia game will be the crunch game, and I still believe it. So it's hypothetical talking about the future when there's so many events that are still to unfold.
But plenty find it profoundly frustrating that players who get so much money and adulation seem to produce such stuttering performances. The England 11 that started tonight are very well paid, with the likes of Gerrard, Owen and Beckham earning in excess of £100,000 a week. Between them, the starting team get paid a weekly salary of over £800,000. It's a lot more than Scotland's starting 11, yet they're preparing to play Italy tomorrow amidst an air of almost euphoric expectation. This cheery pop video heralding an unsung team who now stand one victory from qualification.
At the beginning, nobody gave us a prayer to be in this position. And now that we're in it, everybody expects us to win and take care of it against the world champions. That's the expectation levels out there.
And here is that expectation in person. The bookmakers don't expect Scotland, or for that matter England, to qualify, but Scottish football at least remains buoyed by optimism. Adam Parsons, BBC News.
And those are our top stories this evening. The 10 o'clock news hour continues over on News 24, but on BBC One it's time to join our news teams where you are. And if you're watching Children in Need, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Good evening. Friends of the murdered student Sean Hardy are being offered counselling. The 24-year-old from Bangor was on his way back to his university accommodation in Liverpool when he was attacked. Police believe he may have known his killers. Tonight, 4 men are still being questioned.
The family home where Sean Hardy returned during his university holidays was full of visitors paying their respects and comforting his parents and sister today. Neighbours remember the 24-year-old as friendly and outgoing.
Oh, well, everybody's in shock here, yeah, definitely. Because he was quite well known, you know.
Sean Hardy had been to this city centre nightclub with friends, but had become involved in an argument and was attacked whilst leaving. Detectives say he may have known the person who assaulted him. 4 men from Liverpool remain in police custody. Officers have been granted more time to question one of them, who's from the Aigburth area of the city. Sean Hardy was part of a well-known family in Gwynedd. His uncle Dafydd runs a firm of estate agents, and another uncle, John Hardy, is a broadcaster. Relatives released a statement which said Sean lived life to the full and lit up the lives of those who knew him. This is Sean Hardy's page on a social networking website, and it's clear from the dozens of messages that have come in over the last day or so just how popular he was. Some of the messages read, "You were one of the nicest people I've ever met, and I'll miss you so, so much." The University of Liverpool is offering support and counselling to Sean's friends and colleagues. When he was back home, he worked for the planning department of Anglesey County Council. Staff there said he was happy, jolly and conscientious.
It seems battle lines are being drawn between at least some sections of Plaid Cymru and their political opponents over support for the new military academy at St Athan in the Vale of Glamorgan. This would bring thousands of jobs, but Plaid Cymru's Vice President Jill Evans says the academy isn't in line with Plaid's policies.
Now an unimposing caravan site on the Llyn Peninsula, the name Penaberth is associated with one of the most turbulent events in modern Welsh political history. 71 years ago, 3 members of Plaid Cymru were jailed for an arson attack on a military training camp being built on this site. The late party leader, Gwynfor Evans, was an avowed pacifist. Pacifism has never been official Plaid Cymru policy, but for many in the leadership and in the party's rank and file, pacifism is and remains their call to arms. 70 years on, Wales is to have another military training camp, this time in St Athan, in the Vale of Glamorgan. Supporters say that it'll create 6,000 new jobs.
I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. It's not just the thousands of jobs that will be created, the billions of pounds that will be invested. It's the nature of the skills that are going to be trained.
Wales has provided some of the best soldiers that the armed forces of the United Kingdom have ever seen, and some of the best regiments. If that shows militarisation in Wales, I have to say you've had it for a long time, lady.
It isn't known yet whether or not Jill Evans' paper will go to the vote at tomorrow's meeting. But there's no doubt that what she says about St Athan and the whole question of militarism will prompt a lively debate at the party's National Council in Aberystwyth tomorrow.
Marine conservationists say they might hire security teams to protect the wreckage of a rare American fighter plane found on a beach in Gwynedd. The plane crashed off the Welsh coast during the Second World War, and over the years it's been covered by sand. But now the tides have exposed it, and it's hoped the wreckage can be recovered.
A fighter bomber with a top speed of more than 350 miles per hour, the P-38 Lightning was one of the most advanced aircraft